Hey, it's Dave Bauer.
And this is Brian Mertens, and you're listening to Rewilding Conversations.
Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Well, good afternoon, Brian. Yeah, it's going well today. Going well. Had a good workout with a new trainer, and I'm not someone that typically jumps into the gyms easily. So our snow has melted off that we had been gifted earlier in the winter. So it's in between.
Okay.
It's in between opportunities to do outside play for me. So I relinquish to an indoor man-made facility when I need to. So it was a good exercise. So how are you?
I'm good. We got a little bit of snow last night, and now it's warmed up and it's raining. So we're flip-flopping here.
Yep, it seems to happen. Nature seems to be managing us when she needs to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we were thinking, just want to welcome everybody to the podcast today. And we were thinking that it would be fun today, since last time you did an interview with me looking at bird language. We thought it would be really fun to spend some time looking a little bit more at your story and your background around creative nature play. And because we've talked about creative nature play a fair amount on the podcast, but we haven't really. I still have a lot of questions about it, and like your sort of how you got into all of this and your background and just everything that's led you to the work that you're doing now, and including having written a book, and so lots of cool stuff that we can dive into. And I think sort of where I wanted to start was kind of just to hear a little bit more about what actually led you to creative nature play, because you were not always doing this. At one point I think you were a school teacher, and so how has your life brought you to where you are now, and sort of what's the story if we go back?
Okay, so we'll give a little backstory. By the way, I want to thank you, Brian, for your generosity to have today's topic. It's very exciting, and I do hope that I felt very confident we're going to provide something very entertaining and insightful for those listening. So Rewilding Conversations on Facebook is where we all can connect again to see the past and the upcoming podcasts that Brian and I do. So to go back to your question now. So I loved science. As a young man, I found science to be intriguing. I've always liked living a life with a high degree of curiosity, and as I was going into my undergraduate work, I would ask myself, what might I do that would give me that immersion in science? And so started in a pre-med track, and then from pre-med went into an education track where I was looking like maybe teaching it in some capacity, but focusing on science. So, midway through my teaching career, I found myself hungry again. So I taught for about 13 or 14 years at a middle school level, 7th and 8th grade kind of science in a public school, in a rural public school outside Buffalo. And around that 13, 14 years, something else was knocking at my heart and my curiosity about the planet and its need for care, and how I was beginning to recognize that we as a species weren't doing the kind of diligent, skillful effort that I would want us to be doing for maintaining the integrity of the ecosystems on our planet. So that led to a number of years at the high school level teaching environmental science. Environmental science is not to be confused with earth science. Earth science is more astronomy, minerals, the planets, the geologic epochs and stuff like that. That's what some people would call earth science. Environmental is more about ecology and ecosystem understandings of the dynamics of healthy ecosystems. And then, as a teacher, we had some flexibility of creating deep dives in a number of topics. So I dove deeply into terrestrial topics. I dove deeply into aquatics. And pretty much was one of those early people that saw the data emerging on climate change 20 years before people were talking about it. So kind of knew that these curves were all pointing in directions that weren't particularly good for the human species or any species. So upon retiring, after having a wonderful experience doing environmental teaching, I launched a business called Sustainable Earth Solutions. And that business ran for about 10 years, and I did sustainability consulting. And I ran the Young Adults Environmental Leadership Program during most of those years as well. So I stayed connected with my pedagogical passion, and I tried to dip into the corporate thing. Who's having the big impacts? Well, the corporations are having the big impacts. And for a brief period of time, the local corporations are in Buffalo, and I had a relationship where I was assisting them in forming green teams. That is, a small group of people that are on salary within the companies that would also address environmental and sustainability issues. And then that led to another phase in my life. So this probably now goes back as brief as 4 or 5 years ago now, where there was something about the youngest people on the planet. Yeah, corporations were big and they were impactful, but with eyes into the future, what segment of the human species most needs to get it right, get it way better? Because most people at the corporate level were pretty reluctant to take really deep, authentic dives into sustainability.
Right.
So at that point, Brian, I made the most recent mega shift in my career, and I decided it would be children. It would be children, and I happen to have some beautiful children in my life, 2 of them, Saria and Kai, my grandchildren. We spent a generous amount of time in my backyard, in local green spaces here in and around where I live, in Williamsville, New York. And what I was recognizing is that they were showing me an aspect of nature that I was forgetting was there. It was that every day I'm seeing stuff, Papa, that intrigued me. So, Papa, what's all the stuff under this rock? So the title of the book, what's my children's book, What's Under That Rock, Papa? Came from repeated episodes of the kids coming into the backyard, and one of the first things they would do is take the big, huge pieces of slate, turn them over, and find remarkable diversity of insects life under those rocks because of the cool dampness there. So the life of nature, children's nature authorship was born when the book was released about 2.5 years ago. And that proved to be fun, very challenging. As a teacher, you have a lot of your work done for you. Your marketing, your payroll, your facilities management, your utilities. You don't mess with any of that. You kind of show up and you have energetic passion to teach, and you love kids,
Right.
and you do great jobs in the classroom. But all the infrastructure of the physical setting was managed. So I'll tell you, I think you and I have talked about this. One of the challenges that I will continue to face in this lifetime is, hey, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with maintaining connectivity to people. So the marketing and all that, all had to be learned in ways that will be lifelong phases of learning. So to kind of answer your question in one final summative statement today, creative nature play is a tagline that I birthed. I use the word creative because I'm a creativity consultant, and I have a lot of efficacy in terms of when someone says creative, that can mean a lot of things, and having a graduate certificate in creativity and change leadership helps me know that with deep rigor, the word creativity can be delivered in really remarkable, teachable ways. So creative nature play is my effort at introducing others, children first, people who have relationships with children second, and that would include parents and relatives of those children as well as teachers, in terms of what's nature play? Do you do it? Did you ever do it? And why does it have merit and value? And how might we do it in a really fun, creative way so that more people remember the value of just playing unstructured play in nature? So that's today. That's what I work on today. So I'll pause now for a bit and let you reflect or comment.
Yeah, it's awesome. I always find it so fascinating to see the different ways that people get sort of move through their life and all the little unexpected twists and turns that eventually lead towards, working with kids in nature or doing something environmentally oriented. And sometimes it happens in really surprising ways. So I was just thinking as I was listening to your story that there's a lot of people who listen to our podcast that are really going to appreciate and resonate with that story because they're on that same kind of path. So I thought that was really cool. I was curious about how many kids would you say you've worked with sort of since starting this thing? Like, and I know you probably don't have an exact number, but I'm just curious a little bit about the reach of kids that you've impacted so far, just in the last few years of doing this.
Sure. So the younger children, the 3 to 10-year-old demographic windows were my the area I seek to serve now. The book is probably targeted for 3 to 8-year-olds. And to quantitatively give you a guess, so when I speak, sometimes it's in an auditorium with a couple hundred children and staff. When I do small programming, it's sometimes as intimate as 5 to 10 children. So if I bundled it all together, I think I could probably come up with a number that resembles somewhere between 500 to 800 persons have probably been in a room with me where I've addressed some level of this effort. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. And I think the thing that I find really inspirational about that is that those people, the kids especially, they're going to grow up and, on some level, some of them might be very impacted by it and others might only be peripherally impacted by it. But I always just think that the time, I was talking to somebody yesterday about, how we can actually shift mindsets around the human relationship to the environment, and so much of it is just around those early experiences of connection with the natural world, where if you can open the mind of a child at a young age, that can have some incredible spiraling effects as time goes on. It just sort of amplifies, and it can be one of those catalysts that in the future, one of those kids might choose to take a different path in university just because they have this love for nature. And so, I think that's really interesting. And
the research shows.
It'll be really interesting.
Shows. Go ahead. Please go ahead. Back to you.
The last thing, and then I really want to hear what you said.
Okay.
The last thing I was going to say is just it'll be really interesting, 20, 30, 40 years from now, what the impact of those kids will be, that you've been working with.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I heard with some frequency from the children that I had in school as a teacher, when you stay in a community where you taught, I stayed in Western New York. When I left my school teaching, it was not unusual 5 or 6 or 7 times a year to have someone see me in a restaurant or something and just say, Bauer, that's what they would call me, Bauer. Bauer, you changed my life. You changed my life. You were awesome. Now it doesn't get any better than that when a high school kid turns to and makes a statement like that. So I'm absolutely certain that these young children that I'm gifted to have the privilege of touching and working with and touching their lives, we're changing each other's lives. The research shows that when you get into the neural pathways and uplift the capacity of very, very young children to be in nature, and you honor it, it really does have life-affecting benefits, which I'll talk just a tiny bit about when the time is right, like the benefits of this nature play stuff. I thought it might be really helpful for those that are new to the concept. So I have something in front of me that I use as my little short bullet list of, so what is it that I'm talking about, that Brian and I are talking about when we say creative nature play, or in a broader way, just nature play. And this kind of gives it clarity. So first of all, it's an experience, and it's in an outdoor or natural setting. That's one component of nature play. That the child can be alone. In other words, the child can be on their own. They can be in a backyard. They can be in a woods. They can be near a tent where their family's camping. So the child can be alone in this moment, in this space, or the child can be assisted by an adult or brother or sister. In other words, they can be interacting with another human or another child. That the child's natural curiosity is at play. So in other words, you're not asking the child to pay attention, that you're talking and telling and showing most of the time. In fact, creative nature play is where it's a bit different. You're getting quiet and you're just allowing the child, or the child has no one right next to them, and their just native curiosity is intriguing them, and they're following their own native curiosity to some degree. And lastly, so where can this happen? There's really no place it can't happen. So everyday nature places like backyards, parks, sidewalks, schoolyards, playgrounds, ponds, creeks, woods. As long as there's a green space or a rocky space that one would define as outdoor, that qualifies for a setting to be doing nature play, creative nature play. So, So I just wanted to give a little clarity to folks that might be listening. So I'll bring it back to you, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. It's just, I think the thing that I have always liked about creative nature play, and when I hear you talk about it, it really resonates with me around some of the things that I learned, at Wilderness Awareness School and doing the nature mentoring stuff that I'm doing. Just how similar of an approach it is, that, it's really less about information. And, a big part of what drives me to get people into nature and using their senses to look at trees and plants and birds and just really connecting with what's out there is because it's like, first of all, I mean, our brains, we sort of, as human beings, we evolved in nature. And so our brains are uniquely designed for that kind of environment. We're not technically designed to be sitting at a desk looking at a computer all day. And, it's not really the environment in which our minds are really going to open up to the fullest extent. And so I really believe that having connection with nature and learning about the environment and doing it like not in an intellectual way, it's not about like memorizing facts or anything like that. It's about just having this really authentic, spontaneous experience of discovery that really does something for people, just like on in terms of how they think, how they look at the world, their values, and what they think is important, where they spend their time. And that, as a result, it just goes right back to what you were talking about, around sustainability and some of the changes that are happening in the environment. And it's so clear to me that unless, people care for what they're connected to. If we don't have a connection to the natural world, we're not going to care for it. And so oftentimes when people, are working on sustainability, and this has been my experience, like with what you were talking about, the how people like entrenched in a corporation, it's harder for them to make those sorts of lifestyle changes or business changes where they're going to actually start operating in a way that has less of an impact on the environment, and even could even provide benefits for the environment. It's like the whole worldview thing. And so if rather than looking at the behavior and trying to say, oh, you need to be doing these sustainable behaviors, instead you're just saying, hey, let's go fall in love with nature, and then the behaviors are just a natural consequence of that. You don't even have to tell people to start composting and to, grow food and not put chemicals in the lake, because it's just obviously those are just natural things to do for anyone who is connected with nature. So, I just think I think creative nature play is just it's a really cool way to do it. And I bet you probably have reflections going through your mind as I'm saying those things, because I'm curious what that brings up for you.
So, and I hope the listeners will take me up on this item. So one of the things that I most am curious about is, how do we get the messaging to adults, to moms, to dads, to teachers, to people that have regular relationships with a child? How do we help them overcome, I can't let my kid get dirty, or I don't like my kid getting bugs, I don't want my kid getting germs. So there's these things that can come up that keep a child sequestered indoors. And then, regrettably, the kids are indoors way too often. Their immune systems are becoming compromised because they're not gaining the exposure to the viral and bacterial antigens and stuff that are in soil And when the research shows when a child plays regularly in soil, their immune systems, especially when they're young, their immune systems benefit their whole life. They stay healthier more often because they got the introduction of healthy organisms through their experience in the physical, natural world. And what do we see? We see people running around with bottles of antibacterial lotion all the time, killing everything, as if the natural world needs to stay at bay. You know, somehow we want to turn that fear around in our world today. Now, the neat thing about young children is they don't have it. They have to acquire the fear. They generally are very willing to touch spiders, to hold bugs, to hold centipedes, to let a wiggly worm tickle their palm of their hand, to grab this and to grab that. And it's often the strong negative reaction of an adult that tells the kid, no, that's bad, put that down. And then the kid is so alarmed and surprised by that reaction that it really compromises their ability to be comfortable in nature. So if any of you have really interesting insights in how might we really help parents get outside real briefly with children way more often, please contact Brian and I in our websites. He can say a little bit about his. Mine is creativenatureplay.com, where you can contact me. And I'm really curious about it because the benefits are just so overwhelming when someone is exposed to the simplicity of the benefits, when someone was in nature a lot as a child. So Brian grew up with a tremendous amount of nature in his life. I grew up with an ease of being in nature. That's just the way my generation was raised. Go out, come back for lunch, go back out, come back for dinner, and when the street lights go on, come back. And that was it, you know, and everyone was playing the same game. And regrettably, society's taken this shift where if we were to let our children out like that, you know, we've got nature deficit all through the culture now, where, you know, what's the fear? Well, the fear is the cops are going to pick up my kid and bring him back, and I'm going to get accused of neglect because I wasn't with my child. You know, so maybe I'm going to just read a few benefits of exposing of children being in nature, and for the moment I'll put aside the hurdles that I think are limiting this. So I'll just touch on a few of these. So when a child is in spontaneous play with other children outdoors, the research shows, and we can cite sources if we needed to, but I'm not going to do that here, that creativity and problem solving is significantly enhanced when children have this unstructured play. You have stuff out there for them to play with, and when they pick it up and manipulate it and play with other children in earthen-like settings, that happens. Cognitive abilities flourish. So children that spend more time outdoors have higher cognitive abilities when you study large numbers of children. Academic performance. They've studied children like in the Scandinavian countries where they're mandated to be out in air, in sky and light X number of minutes a day, like close to an hour a day, to get their funding from the government. And they find that the kids' performance actually excels when you give them portions of a day in natural settings versus sequester them in an artificial setting inside a building all day. This thing that's emerged in the world, ADD, and all these learning deficits, they probably existed some in my day, but we know the research is showing that they're exponentially increasing. And part of that is because we're asking children to to behave in a way that is not native to their DNA. Whereas when they're out in nature and able to do more playful, spontaneous stuff and experiment without reporting on a test so frequently and regularly, some of these children that get tagged with nature deficit disorders, it just doesn't show up. They don't have it because they're not limited in their ability to be in the physical environment. Nutrition improves. Eyesight, can you believe it? Yeah, they've got research that shows that children's eyesight is better. Now, that makes sense, because if a children is outdoors, their eye muscles are focusing on distant, close, real frequently. Whereas and they've got lots of different lighting that their eyes have to adjust to. Whereas indoors, it's an ambient level of light often, and the level of muscle movement in the eye is much more limited because there's much less range in what they're looking at. The social relationships are much enhanced in children that are playing among themselves outdoors in unstructured play when they get those opportunities. Self-discipline is enhanced. Stress management is enhanced. So it's just, if somehow we could let our parents and the players that make the decisions on, hey, in our neighborhood, can kids go out and play? Block clubs could turn that around really quickly if block clubs got together and once a year reminded themselves of the value of their children being in nature. I think what I'll do is pause now again and invite any feedback or thoughts you're having, Brian, and then if we can touch on another aspect of it. But I just wanted to review a light splash in terms of the remarkable research-based benefits of children being in everyday nature play.
Would you say that you work more with, obviously you're always working with children, and that's kind of like one of the core focuses, but would you say, do you find yourself being in a space where you're encouraging more parents, or are you working more with educators, like who are wanting to basically do creative nature play with kids?
Thank you. Really skillful question. No, I need to. I want to. The children will benefit more if I could have more, if more of us that do this kind of work could be talking to the parents. Parents so frequently think, to raise my child well, I need to boom, 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 boom. And if you counted the number of items on their list, it isn't so much the count, it's what are the items in the list. And often one of them won't be, one of the things my child needs to do to thrive is to get outdoor in fresh air with some frequency every day. That would not be in most modern parents' short list, okay? And regrettably, it's one of the most important no budget items that needs to find its way into parents raising children. Now, one of the reasons it's not there is because many parents did not have a great deal of exposure to nature themselves because of this generational thing. Those that did, so for example, my daughters, Sri and Kai's mom, those kids are out a lot. Those kids are out a great deal because Jessica belongs to that maybe smaller tribe of individuals that believe and know my kid will thrive if I can get that kid out. Now, is it work? Well, yeah, it's work. It's a little bit of work because regrettably Jessica lives in a physical setting with other houses and people around, and she can't just open the door like my mom did and say, David, get outside and go to the park and play ball or do whatever you're going to do and come back. We don't raise our children that way. in modern society. Very frequently, if they go to camp, that's what's different. They're off at camp for a week, but we don't want to make it a 1 or 2 week family vacation where they're immersed in a national park. I mean, that's great stuff, and I would never want that not to happen. But what we're trying to foster is open the door and let the child just get outside and be outside, and keep a little eye on them, provide some stuff that would intrigue them, but just recognize the merit and value of that need to be outdoors. So I'm going to bring it back to you, Brian, and see where you want to go next.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I want to dig more into this because I'm like imagining that there probably are parents listening to this conversation right now, maybe even parents who, they have young children and they're looking for ways to actually get their kids outside and to get them the benefits of creative nature play. But maybe they do have things like, I don't necessarily have the greatest living situation. Like maybe I'm in the middle of a city, or maybe I don't personally have a lot of nature connection experience. Maybe they're like, I totally see why, we should let kids get dirty, they should be around bugs and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not even comfortable with bugs and getting dirty. And, like I don't garden, I don't do any of that stuff. How can I help my kids? And, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay. So the Internet is a gift here. If you spend a little bit of time Googling nature play in my community, start putting different qualities in the search windows. There are springing up in almost every community now small little hubs of groups, communities, whose mission, they've made it their mission, these families, these parents, to get their children out. Please Google Children and Nature Network. You could probably the most powerful thing a parent could do if they had access to the Internet is to Google Children and Nature Network. That is probably the biggest global hub of resources where they can self-educate, they can find others in their community when they go to the right little portal in the website, their zip code. Who else is doing this? So I was just on the phone this morning with a woman, Lisa, that works at the Buffalo Zoo. And Lisa's job description is to offer, young children nature immersion programming at the zoo, the Buffalo Zoo, but also in the community. So once a month, Lisa has a website, a Facebook page, Western New York Family Nature something. I have to pull up the folder. I'll pull this while we're talking. And she sets a place, and they go to this place, and the families come out, and there'll be 1 or 2 experts on site. She'll be the expert. If nobody else, it's her, and she is an expert. So they'll do, tracking, and if there's snow, they'll do something related to tracking that on that particular excursion, or snow sculptures. Come out this week, and if there's some snow, we'll make an effort to have some fun with that snow and design some snow sculptures. So there are these groups in your community, in almost every community, that they're outside, and if you don't like going out alone, they'll go with you. You simply have to look for them. And again, that place, Children in Nature Network, is a great place to start. There's programming. If you go to your community ed programming portals, if you go to your libraries and ask, who do you have that comes in and speaks to children about outdoor play. You know, they may even hear the name Dave Bauer shows up because that's what I do. I do a fair amount of work at libraries, and I'll do a little reading of some kind of nature immersion story, and then we do a kinesthetic activity, and if weather permits, we're outdoors part of the time. And the kids, they just thrive. They love it. Now, your question is really skillful, Brian, because you talk about the parents. There is a deficit here. There is a need to find novel ways to help parents find their way to some training on this, and that's where I'm struggling a bit. You know, where might I go where I could get the parents? Because if I'm real busy most of the time with the children, which I often am, I'm really not helping the parent gain the comfort and helping the parent gain the early toolbox that they would want so they could replicate what I'm doing. It really requires novel ways to bring parents out for an evening. It's almost like if you had an ideal setting, it would be at a church or at a library, and you'd be in a room, and the kids would be over here playing, and the parents might be over here getting a little training, so that's a way it can look. I know when I do my training, I invite parents to stay, observe me, watch me, notice what I do, you know, so they can learn by observation. But a fair number of times, to be rather candid, the parents have busy lives, so it's kind of a drop their child, and they walk away from the program area, and then they come back to the program area. So more effort on my part needs to be devoted to 2018 to finding ways to do it for the parents, because they're the ones that once they get it, and it's really not rocket science at all. It really isn't. It's more a qualitative thing. It's a qualitative thing, like when I read those bullets a little while ago. It's getting the child out in your company. Don't feel you've got to lead it. Don't lead it. Just be with the child. See where their native curiosity goes. Act excited with them. Put on your discovery mode persona and discover things with them. And then it goes from there. It's kind of a spontaneous piece. It emerges from there. But the key ingredients are curiosity, a child, your own curiosity, and a regular opportunity to get into a safe outdoor setting.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely think anyone in Buffalo. I mean, if you're in that area, definitely make it out to one of Dave's programs, and because you've got a bunch of different programs that you do. You've got the readings of What's Under That Rock, Papa, and then I was looking at your other programs just before we came on the call here, and you got a bunch of them, and I was curious. Do you have any favorites? Like, which ones are your favorite to do?
Yeah, I was meeting with someone in one of our local towns yesterday, and I was handing him the page-and-a-half sheet that I have of my programs, and I said, I got 3 or 4 real favorites here, so I'll just touch on a couple of them. So there is one titled Creative Nature Play and Mindfulness. It's one of my newest programs. So in this workshop, and these run about an hour, they can be stretched to 90 minutes gently and with a lot of fun. So there's a little bit of reading from some neat author. There's often, we're trying to help kids love books, so we try to have a couple of books available for the child to touch and feel, and then I will read a little bit to them. And then what's really fun about this one is you can really have a lot of fun with taking components of nature. So what I did with my last episode of this one is I got my iPhone and I found a whole bunch of really cool sounds that creatures make, about 7 or 8 different creatures and the sounds they make. And I wouldn't let the kids know, I wouldn't let them see the animal. They had to listen. So what we do is we help the child use their senses, as many senses as possible, sometimes one sense at a time, and to be curious about, what do you think that is? And is that an adult or a little one, And then once they've heard the sound repeatedly, then I'll turn my phone around and let them see what the creature is that was making that sound. So here I am doing nature play. And the mindfulness component comes into, hey, let's just pause for a little bit and just breathe for about 30 seconds. Just breathe. So we talk about breath and breathing and inhaling and exhaling. And we get real still. And then we'll talk about, so what are you hearing right now in this moment? What do you hear? But it's mindful, because you're talking about the here and the now, the here and the now, the here and the now. Mindfulness is that attribute of being alive in the here, in the now. So it's so lovely to do with children, because that's where they spend their time, here and now. So adults, it's tough, but with young children, they're just organically there most of the time anyways. So that's one of my favorites, the blend of nature play and mindfulness, and I could go on further about the components of that, but I'm not at this time. Another one is something that I call hideout for trolls. Build a hideout for trolls. And technically it isn't really a hideout, it's more a play area. So I went to Amazon and I found these really short 3-inch trolls that are just very colorful and cute. They come in sets of 4. And I got about 25 of these little guys. And so when a family or group of people come in for the hideout for trolls, again, we start with a little bit of a book reading and stuff, and then we do a little exploring of the green space that we're in, just a native, let's explore this place a little bit and see what we find. But while they're off exploring, the trolls magically show up. So they appear in the grass, or they're under a tree. And while the kids are off, I lay out all the trolls. And I go, guys, don't you hear them? Don't you hear them? They're here. And the kids, of course, don't know. I've been stashing trolls all over the place. And then all of a sudden, one of the children will spot one. And I go, whoa, and all the kids are discovering trolls all over the place now, right? And the children will say, do they come alive, Mr. Dave? Do they come alive? I mean, their imagination is just fabulous. So what do we end up doing? We end up collecting stuff in the outdoor setting wherever we are, and then we build a little playground for the trolls. And they pair up with 2 or 3 children each, and they build a little micro play area, and you give them a little twine, and you bring a stash of sticks that are anywhere from 12 inches to 3 feet. And they engineer those sticks and the twine into things like teepees and swings, and they do just really novel stuff without you even telling them to do it. And there's some images on my website, and there's some images on my Facebook page of some really cool structures that these children built when they made their hideouts or play areas for trolls. There's a few more, but all of them really. So here's one where you've got a sit spot where discover your nature lens, and you talk to a child about being still in a space, and you get outside and you all get still for just a little bit, and then you go through a sense immersion. So what are you seeing here? And we get quiet, and we get mindful, and we breathe, and we then ask and say what we're seeing. And we go through the different senses, and by the time we're done, they've amplified, they've had a chance to practice their nature observation capacity. And they come away calm, they come away satisfied when they do these nature programs, because you've appealed to their native desire to be in the world like they're wired to be in the world. You're not forcing them to be in an artificial man-made world following, the rigor of a day. And we all have to learn how to behave within the rigors of a day. That's important. But remembering to blend it with the gentleness and the softness and the openness to native play is just so good for the adult, the teacher, the parent, the grandparent. Hey, grandparents are in a really, really cool place here. You want to amp up your capacity to have a blast with some young children in your community or with your own grandchildren. Instead of feeling like, oh, they don't want to be with me, I'm old, and da-da-da-da, and da-da-da-da. All you have to do is say, I'd like to come by and grab so-and-so for an hour or two, and then take them any place outdoors where you have a little bit of comfort, and just be with that child. And they will want more of you as a grandparent, I assure you. They will want to see you again. Yeah, because their parents are often so busy and paying attention to other things. The grandparents are the ones that they can act as change agents here. They can truly act as change agents within their families, because they've got a little less that they're working on to maintain their situation compared to the parent. So grandparents can be really remarkable change agents. They really can.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I mean, I can totally hear the passion when you're talking about, the trolls and just sharing these different stories. And, yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun and just a really great thing that you're doing there. So, just really appreciate you sharing all these insights and stories and a little bit more. I've really enjoyed getting a little bit more of a window into the world of Dave Bauer. It's been great.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks. And please trust your own intuition, listeners. Everyone gets this. This is not something that you have to learn deeply. You simply have to know in your heart that you're made to do this. And just do it, and don't worry about right and wrong. Just do it a little bit. Learn a little bit each time. Go back and replicate what you found fun, and allow yourself a low. Don't go out with a really high critic in mind. Keep your inner critic a little soft. And you too, no matter what your age is, whether you're 3 or 103, you'll find that these little micro episodes of nature play will help you thrive as a human being.